Beloved, as you step into this moment, I decree that you are stepping into a divine appointment, an encounter with the God who never sleeps nor slumbers, the God who moves in the shadows, the God who does his greatest work in the darkest moments of your life. You have not come here by accident. You have been summoned by the Spirit of the living God to receive what only heaven can deliver. For the midnight hour is not the moment of your defeat. It's the moment of divine intervention. Midnight is where God interrupts cycles, overturns verdicts, breaks chains, and resets destinies. Midnight is where he reveals that when human help has reached its limit, divine power begins its work. And today I declare that the God of the midnight hour is rising in your situation. He's stepping into your home, your mind, your family, your finances, your health, your future, doing for you what no friend, no relative, no connection, no system, and no human hand could ever accomplish. You may have cried in the night, but the God who hears the whispers of your soul is about to answer with demonstrations of power. You may have wrestled in the dark season, but the God of breakthrough is about to show you that nothing is impossible with him. When the clock strikes midnight in the spirit, foundations begin to shake, chains begin to fall, and every prison door begins to open. Heaven is issuing orders. Angels are being dispatched. Every delayed miracle is being released. Every closed door is being commanded to open. Every satanic embargo is being forcibly lifted. So as we step into prayer today, come with expectation, come with a posture of prophetic readiness, come knowing that God is about to do what no one else can do. He is rewriting the script of your life. He is reversing every negative report. He is restoring what was stolen. He is making the impossible possible. You are about to witness divine intervention, supernatural acceleration, and unprecedented breakthrough. Lift your faith, because the God of the midnight hour is here, and he is about to do for you what no one else can do. The midnight hour is God's divine turning point, where impossibilities bow and invisible battles are won before daylight breaks. And when we begin to understand this truth, something shifts within the spirit. Because the midnight hour is not merely a moment on the clock, but a prophetic season, a spiritual intersection where time and eternity converge, and where God steps into the affairs of his people with deliberate, decisive power. Midnight represents transition, the closing of one cycle and the birthing of another. It is the moment when darkness is at its fullest. Yet it is also the moment when light begins its quiet return. In the natural, midnight is silent, but in the realm of the spirit, it is the hour of divine activity, supernatural warfare, angelic movement, and heaven's intervention on behalf of the righteous. It is at midnight that God proves that he is not limited by the circumstances that limit me. It is at midnight that he shows that what seems impossible for you is absolutely possible for him. It is at midnight that he demonstrates the fullness of his sovereignty, his mastery over time, his supremacy over darkness, and his unmatched ability to turn the tide in your favor. Throughout Scripture, we see the midnight hour as a pattern of God's intervention. At midnight, the Israelites were delivered from Egypt as God struck down the firstborn of the oppressors, executing a judgment that no earthly power could stop. At midnight, Paul and Silas prayed and sang praises, and heaven responded with an earthquake that shook the foundations of the prison, broke every chain, and opened every locked door. At midnight, the bridegroom arrived in Jesus' parable, signaling that the appointed moment of promise had come. Over and over, midnight becomes a prophetic symbol of God moving when it seems too late, too dark, too quiet, or too hopeless. Midnight shows us that God is not intimidated by darkness, nor is he restrained by the absence of human solutions. It is in this hour that impossibilities bow, because impossibility itself is nothing more than a platform for God's glory to manifest in its purest form. God chooses the midnight hour intentionally. He chooses it because it is the time when every natural resource has reached its limit. There are moments in life when you run out of strategies, connections, energy, and strength. You pray, you push, you try, yet nothing shifts. And then comes the midnight moment, the moment when you have done all you can do and all that remains is God's supernatural intervention. Midnight exposes what human effort cannot achieve and what only divine power can accomplish. When God steps into your midnight, he does what no one else can do. He reverses verdicts, breaks cycles, dismantles satanic operations, silences demonic chatter, and ushers in supernatural breakthrough that human logic cannot explain. Invisible battles are often won at midnight because midnight requires faith without evidence. The midnight hour is where God trains warriors, forges character, increases discernment, and strengthens spiritual authority. Midnight seasons push you deeper into prayer, deeper into worship, deeper into trust, and deeper into alignment with the will of God. Midnight forces you to depend on God alone. It forces you to pray when you don't feel like praying, to believe when your eyes see nothing, to stand when everything around you shakes. Midnight is the hour of testing, but it is also the hour of triumph. You may not see the battle, but heaven is moving, angels are warring, and God is orchestrating outcomes that will be revealed in the light of day. Midnight is where the real victory is secured, long before the manifestation appears. Many breakthroughs are birthed in the unseen realm of midnight. God does his greatest work behind the scenes, out of sight, beyond your natural awareness. Midnight victories often look like nothing is happening. It feels silent, still, stagnant. But silence is not absence. Stillness is not inactivity. God works in the silence. He moves in ways you cannot perceive. He shifts people, places, and systems while you sleep. He sends instructions to angels. He releases judgments against your enemies. He reroutes attacks, collapses strongholds, and overturns demonic strategies. Midnight is where God changes the story before the enemy even realizes his plot has failed. Midnight is where chains fall off before you ever reach the door. Midnight is where foundations shake before you ever make a move. Midnight is where victory is sealed before the manifestation catches up to the moment. When you are in a midnight season, you must remember that its darkness is deceptive. Midnight is the darkest moment, yet it also announces the beginning of a new day. It marks the boundary where things shift from what was to what will be. Midnight reminds you that even in the darkest hour, God is moving. It reminds you that the night cannot last forever, that dawn must break, that promises must be fulfilled, that seasonal cycles must change. Midnight is a divine signal that your waiting is not wasted. Your tears are not ignored. Your prayers are not unheard. Midnight is the hour that tests your faith, but it is also the hour that rewards it. It is the moment where God begins to work in your life in ways that defy reasoning, timing, and expectation. The God of the midnight hour specializes in sudden intervention. He is the God of immediate shifts. He is the God of suddenly, the God of and it came to pass, the God who steps in without warning, without explanation, without negotiation. He is the God who opens doors no one can shut, who breaks chains no one can bind again, who elevates you in ways no one can reverse. When God moves at midnight, everything changes. What was hard becomes easy. What was blocked becomes open. What was delayed becomes accelerated. What was denied becomes approved. Midnight is where God announces that the season of stagnation is over and the season of divine movement has begun. You may have been in your midnight season for a long time, praying, waiting, believing, wondering when the shift will come. But midnight only lasts for a moment in God's timing. Even if it feels prolonged, it is still a temporary place. Midnight is a threshold, not a destination. It is the crossing point between struggle and breakthrough, between silence and manifestation, between hardship and testimony. And while the enemy may try to convince you that midnight means defeat, heaven declares that midnight means deliverance. Midnight means God is working. Midnight means the tide is turning. Midnight means a new day is already unfolding. Midnight means the impossible is about to bow to the name of the Lord God Almighty. When human help expires and earthly systems fail, the God of the midnight hour steps in with supernatural intervention that overrides natural limitations. And this truth becomes the anchor of your faith when you reach the end of your own strength. Because there comes a time in every life when the resources you once depended on no longer work, when the people you trusted can no longer assist you, when the strategies you relied upon prove insufficient. And it is in these moments of human limitation that the power of God reveals itself with unmatched clarity. God often waits until you have exhausted every earthly option so that when he moves, there is no confusion about who deserves the glory. When human help dries up, divine assistance begins to flow. When earthly systems collapse, the kingdom of God stands unshaken. When people walk away, God draws near in power. The midnight hour is that sacred space where all of man's strength ends and all of God's strength begins, where his intervention is not simply desired, but required, and where he moves in such a way that no man can take credit for the outcome. Therefore, there are moments when life corners you into a position where you can no longer rely on intellect, experience, or your own ability to navigate circumstances. Human solutions get you only so far, and then you meet the point where God must step in. The woman with the issue of blood exhausted her finances and her medical options, yet healing came only when she touched the hem of Jesus. The disciples battled a storm with their professional skills as fishermen, but safety came only when Jesus rebuked the winds and waves. Lazarus had the love of his sisters and the support of a community, but resurrection power was required when all human comfort and effort ended at the tomb. Over and over, Scripture demonstrates that God's supernatural intervention begins where human capability ends. It is not weakness to reach the end of your strength. It is a divine setup for God to reveal himself as the God who does what no one else can do. Earthly systems fail because they are built on limitations, limited understanding, limited power, limited resources, limited time. God, however, operates from the realm of the limitless. He is not restricted by circumstance, not confined by logic, not bound by natural laws. He is not dependent on earthly permission to enact heavenly decisions. He does not need majority agreement, human validation, or societal approval. When the God of the midnight hour intervenes, he overrides the limitations of the natural realm with the authority of the supernatural. He opens doors that earthly powers closed. He promotes those whom systems overlooked. He delivers those whom structures oppress. He lifts those whom people rejected. Human systems may label you, limit you, or ignore you, but God's intervention breaks every earthly restriction and ushers you into a realm of divine possibility. When God steps into the midnight hour of your life, he does not merely adjust situations, he transforms them. He does not simply make things easier, he makes things possible. He does not only shift your environment, he shifts your entire trajectory. Human help can improve conditions, but only God can change destinies. Earthly systems may provide temporary relief, but only God can provide permanent breakthrough. You may receive sympathy or advice from people, but divine intervention brings deliverance, healing, restoration, and supernatural turnaround. When God intervenes, he doesn't add his power to the situation, he becomes the solution. He does not participate, he dominates, he does not negotiate with darkness, he drives it out completely, he does not request permission. He establishes authority. This is what it means for God to override natural limitations. There are seasons when God intentionally allows earthly systems to fail you because they were never meant to sustain the weight of your destiny. When people disappoint you, it is not always betrayal. Sometimes it is divine removal because their support would cause you to lean on them instead of God. When relationships collapse, God is shifting you into a place where his voice becomes clearer. When finances dry up, God is positioning you for a miracle that money could never buy. When plans fall apart, God is revealing that he has a superior blueprint. The midnight hour strips away false securities and exposes every idol of self-reliance. It brings you to the place where you say, God, if you don't do it, it cannot be done. And that is exactly the moment God has been waiting for, because he moves best in environments where faith has no alternative but him. There is a level of intervention that only occurs when human help is no longer an option. It is in this place that you encounter God as Jehovah Elyon, the Most High God, who sits above systems, who outranks structures, who outrules decisions, who overturns verdicts. He is the God who cancels what men approve and approves what men cancel. He is the God who elevates you without a resume, qualifies you without credentials, and blesses you beyond the limitations of your background. When earthly systems say no, God says, watch me. When people say it's impossible, God says, it is already done. When the world says there is no way, God says, I am the way. Midnight is the hour where God shows that he never needed man to agree with his plan for your life. In the midnight hour, natural laws bow to spiritual laws. Time bends to God's timing. Circumstances yield to his sovereignty. Situations recalibrate themselves according to his word. Everything that was designed to restrict you loses its power under divine intervention. God does not need a favorable environment to bless you. He does not need cooperative people to promote you. He does not need a perfect situation to move on your behalf. He can bless you in famine, elevate you in captivity, prosper you in drought, and advance you in hostile territory. Midnight is the hour when he proves that he is not limited by the conditions surrounding you, but reigns as Lord over every condition. When human help expires, you are not abandoned, you are positioned. When earthly systems fail, you are not forsaken, you are aligned. The midnight hour is not the hour of despair, it is the hour of divine takeover. It is the moment when heaven says, stand back and see the salvation of the Lord. This is where God begins to turn the heart of kings, rearrange circumstances, confound the wise, and showcase his power. You may feel stretched, pressured, or exhausted, but these feelings are indicators that something supernatural is about to occur. Every failure of human help is a prophetic signal that God himself is stepping into the situation. And when he steps in, he does so with precision, purpose, and power. He steps in not to assist your effort, but to replace it with his own. He steps in not to strengthen your plan, but to establish his plan. He steps in not to revive what is dying, but to birth what is divine. He steps in not to repair systems that failed you, but to reveal a kingdom that cannot fail. The midnight hour is the cradle of miracles, the birthplace of breakthrough, and the stage upon which God displays his sovereignty with unmistakable glory. It is in this hour that you are reminded that God is not just a helper. He is the source, the sustainer, the waymaker, the miracle worker, and the God who does exceedingly abundantly above all you can ask or imagine. Midnight is the realm where God shakes foundations, unlocks spiritual prisons, and initiates destiny-altering breakthroughs. And when you begin to understand the depth of this truth, you realize that midnight is not simply a symbolic moment, but a spiritual battleground where heaven engages the forces of darkness on your behalf. Midnight represents the moment where spiritual intensity is at its highest, where the enemy often strikes with discouragement, fear, confusion, or pressure. But it is also the moment when God releases his greatest demonstrations of power. Midnight is the hour where the unseen realm is most active, not because darkness dominates, but because light is preparing to break forth in ways that cannot be stopped. It is the hour where God disrupts demonic patterns, interrupts satanic cycles, and dismantles invisible structures that have worked against your destiny. Midnight is not the hour of defeat. It is the hour of divine disruption, the hour where God overturns what the enemy intended, the hour where heaven announces that enough is enough and begins to shift the trajectory of your life. When God shakes foundations, he is targeting the root of a thing, not the surface. He goes beneath the patterns, beneath the behaviors, beneath the symptoms, and uproots the underlying structures that have kept you bound. A foundation represents the thing that supports everything else. For some people, it is a generational pattern. For others, it is a limiting belief, a traumatic memory, a demonic covenant, a hidden fear, or a mindset shaped by years of struggle. When God moves at midnight, he does not merely address what you can see. He confronts what you cannot see. He shakes the foundation of your circumstances. He shakes the foundation of your spiritual opposition. He shakes the foundation of the stronghold that has resisted your progress. Just as he shook the prison foundations for Paul and Silas, he causes the spiritual ground under your feet to tremble, signaling that the structures which once held you are no longer authorized to contain you. The midnight shaking is not chaotic. It is calculated. It is intentional. It is God announcing to every spiritual adversary that the season of containment is over. When God shakes foundations, chains cannot remain intact. Restrictions cannot remain in place. Barriers cannot remain standing. Darkness cannot remain unchallenged. Every shackle fashioned against you begins to loosen because God himself is intervening. What once seemed immovable becomes temporary under the weight of his power. Midnight shaking is the evidence that God is actively dismantling the invisible cages meant to confine your destiny. In the midnight hour, God also unlocks spiritual prisons, and these prisons are not always visible or physical. Many people walk through life imprisoned in areas of the soul and spirit, held hostage by fear, bound by cycles of failure, limited by emotional wounds, trapped in patterns that replay year after year. But they're prisons of offense, prisons of shame, prisons of insecurity, prisons of addiction, prisons of stagnation, prisons of mental torment, and prisons formed from words spoken over you by others. But when God enters your midnight, every lock begins to click open. Every door that confines you begins to swing wide. Every strategy of the enemy that sought to limit you becomes ineffective. Midnight becomes the moment where God reveals that he has never intended for you to live behind spiritual bars, and he begins to escort you out of the confinement that has held you back. When God unlocks a spiritual prison, he does not need a key. He is the key. His presence alone is enough to disrupt chains, break restraints, and open doors. He does not ask permission from the forces that held you. He does not negotiate your release. He issues a divine command that no power can resist. This is why Paul and Silas did not escape their prison. God exited them from their prison. They did not break out. God broke them out. In the same way, your midnight is not about your strength or strategy. It is about God releasing his authority. It is about him stepping into your situation with the full weight of heaven's power and announcing that your captivity is over. When he unlocks a spiritual prison, he initiates not only freedom, but purpose, movement, and forward momentum that nothing can hinder. Midnight is also the hour where God initiates destiny-altering breakthroughs. Breakthrough is not just a blessing, it is a shift. It is a moment where God changes the direction of your life, alters the path you have been on, and places you into alignment with his divine blueprint. Breakthrough is when God collapses the barriers that stood between you and your purpose. It is when he propels you into a new season with such force that the old season cannot follow you. Breakthrough is the aha moment when prophetic promises begin transitioning into visible reality. When God initiates a breakthrough at midnight, he is not simply giving you relief, he is releasing you into advancement. He is accelerating you into a future that previously seemed unreachable. He is repositioning you for divine assignments that require the chains of the past to remain broken. Midnight breakthroughs are sudden, they are unexpected, they are explosive. They occur when everything appears still. They happen when the enemy least anticipates it. They manifest when your own hope feels thin and your strength feels depleted. God deliberately moves at midnight to demonstrate that your breakthrough is not dependent on the conditions around you. It is dependent on his timing, his word, his will, and his power. Midnight breakthroughs signify that God is interrupting the natural order of your life with a supernatural intervention that will leave no doubt that he alone orchestrated your transformation. In the midnight hour, God often works in silence, and his silence is not absence, it is strategy. Silence does not mean inactivity, it means preparation. While the world sleeps, God is moving things into alignment. While you feel nothing shifting, God is shifting everything. While you see no evidence of change, God is setting up encounters, rearranging circumstances, repositioning you, and preparing doors you did not know you needed. Midnight silence is the womb of breakthrough. It is the place where miracles incubate before they manifest. God hides his movements so that no one but him receives credit for the outcome. The midnight hour also tests your posture. It tests whether you will worship in the dark, pray in the pressure, praise in the confusion, and trust when you cannot trace the plan. Midnight demands faith without visibility. It requires you to lift your voice when everything around you feels quiet. It requires you to stand on the promises of God when nothing in the natural matches what he has spoken. Midnight is the hour where your faith becomes a weapon that unlocks what the enemy tried to bury. Midnight worship shakes prisons. Midnight prayer opens doors. Midnight praise confuses the enemy. Midnight confidence in God invites supernatural intervention. God uses midnight to prove that he is not limited by time, atmosphere, resources, or human constraints. He uses midnight to reveal himself as the one who moves when no one else can move, the one who delivers when no one else can deliver, the one who shifts the impossible into the realm of the inevitable. Midnight reveals his sovereignty, his supremacy, and his unmatched ability to alter the very foundations of reality. Every midnight shaking, unlocking, and breakthrough is designed with one purpose in mind: to align you with the destiny God prepared for you before the foundations of the world. Midnight becomes the hour where prophecy begins to unfold, where prayers begin to manifest, where hindrances begin to crumble, and where God unveils the next chapter of your life with divine precision. Midnight is not the end of your story. It is the birthplace of transformation. Midnight is where God prepares you for the dawn that is about to break, the new season that is about to emerge, and the breakthrough that is about to redefine your entire journey. The God of the midnight hour reverses negative reports, cancels demonic verdicts, and rewrites the narrative the enemy tried to impose. And when you understand this dimension of God's intervention, you stop fearing the darkness, because you realize that midnight is the stage upon which God displays his judicial authority over every accusation and every assignment launched against your life. Midnight is not merely a time on the clock. It is a spiritual jurisdiction where God exposes the lies of the enemy, overturns the conclusions of man, and dismantles every pronouncement that contradicts his promise for you. Midnight is where God sits as the righteous judge, presiding over the courtroom of heaven, issuing decrees that override every earthly decision and every demonic scheme. It is at midnight that God proves that no weapon formed against you can prosper, because every tongue that rises in judgment is condemned by his word. Midnight becomes the hour where he takes what was spoken against you, what was planned against you, what was designed to derail you, and he dismantles it with a single declaration of his sovereign authority. Negative reports are not just words spoken, they are conclusions drawn from limited perspectives, natural observations, human reasoning, and the enemy's attempts to manipulate outcomes. They come from doctors, from circumstances, from systems, from critics, from statistics, and sometimes even from your own mind. But when the God of the midnight hour steps in, he does not submit to the natural evidence. He supersedes it. He does not align with human conclusions. He overturns them. He does not accept the final word of man. He declares his own. A negative report may be factual, but it is not final. Midnight is the moment when God announces that facts must bow to truth, and the truth is whatever he has spoken. If he says you will live, sickness cannot claim you. If he says you will rise, failure cannot bury you. If he says you will prosper, lack cannot hold you. If he says you will overcome, adversity cannot stop you. Midnight is when God proves that his word outranks every report that attempted to define your destiny. Demonic verdicts are the enemy's attempts to legislate your life through cycles, patterns, delays, setbacks, and spiritual resistance. These verdicts are often invisible but deeply felt. They manifest as constant battles, repeated disappointments, generational struggles, unexplainable warfare, or persistent opposition that seems to block your progress. These verdicts attempt to stamp denied on every area of your life. They attempt to steal your confidence, drain your strength, and convince you that breakthrough is out of reach. But when the God of the midnight hour rises in his authority, every demonic verdict is rendered null and void. Midnight is the hour when spiritual rulings made in darkness are exposed to the light of God's justice. It is the moment when he declares that whatever the enemy tried to sentence you to, failure, sickness, delay, fear, bondage, stagnation, has been canceled. Midnight is the hour where God issues divine injunctions, halting every demonic operation and silencing every voice of accusation that spoke against your potential. When God rewrites the narrative, he is not editing your story. He is restoring the original script he authored before time began. The enemy attempts to insert chapters of defeat, pages of fear, scenes of heartbreak, and paragraphs of loss. He tries to convince you that the story he crafted is the one you must live. But God interrupts the plot at midnight. He tears out the pages the enemy wrote and reinstates his divine intention. He restores missed seasons, resurrects abandoned dreams, reopens closed opportunities, reignites lost passion, and redeems years that felt wasted. God does not simply modify your narrative, he reclaims it. Midnight is the moment when he reveals that the pen has never left his hand and that he alone determines the outcome of your story. The enemy may have influenced previous chapters, but God has already authored the ending, and his ending always leads to victory, restoration, and divine fulfillment. Midnight is the hour when heaven's court is in full session. Angels stand as witnesses. Demons tremble under judgment. The blood of Jesus speaks on your behalf, declaring mercy, redemption, and covenant rights. Every accusation launched against you is reviewed in the light of grace, and every curse is dismantled by the power of the cross. God does not simply declare you free, he legally establishes your freedom. He does not only forgive your past, he erases the power of your past to limit your future. Midnight is the place where spiritual transactions occur, where God releases new decrees over your life, and where verdicts are issued that shift the direction of your destiny. Every word spoken against you in darkness is overturned in the light of his justice. As God reverses negative reports, he also reverses internal conclusions you formed about yourself. Sometimes the most destructive reports are the ones you believed. Reports that said you were not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough, not capable enough. Reports that said your mistakes disqualified you, that your past defined you, that your failures would follow you. Midnight is the hour where God dismantles every lie you internalize and replaces it with the truth of your identity in him. He reminds you that you are chosen, redeemed, anointed, empowered, and destined. He restores confidence, ignites purpose, and awakens the warrior within you. Midnight is not only the hour where circumstances change, it is the hour where you change. When God cancels demonic verdicts, he also breaks cycles of loss, cycles of fear, cycles of limitation, cycles of disappointment, cycles of dysfunction, cycles that repeated themselves through generations. Midnight is where generational patterns dissolve. Midnight is where curses are broken. Midnight is where inherited struggles lose their grip. Midnight is where God says, this cycle will not continue another day. When God steps into your midnight, he not only brings breakthrough for you, but for those connected to you. The verdicts that were meant to limit your bloodline end with you, and the blessings intended for your lineage begin with you. When God rewrites your narrative, he also repositions you. Midnight breakthrough leads to divine realignment. Suddenly, doors that were closed begin to open. Opportunities that were withheld begin to emerge. People assigned to your destiny begin to appear. Divine connections, prophetic encounters, supernatural instructions, and unusual favor begin to surround you. Midnight is the hour that shifts you from waiting into walking, from surviving into advancing, from being overlooked into being appointed. God does not rewrite your narrative without preparing a new chapter filled with grace, elevation, and divine orchestration. The God of the midnight hour performs these reversals not slowly, not gradually, but suddenly. Midnight breakthroughs often occur in moments that feel instantaneous, moments where everything changes in a single divine intervention. One announcement, one encounter, one opportunity, one open door, one word from God can reverse years of struggle. Midnight is the moment when the tide turns, without warning, when the impossible becomes achievable, when what resisted you collapses, and when the favor of God becomes visibly evident. Midnight is the hour where divine timing meets divine power, producing divine outcomes that no force of darkness can withstand. He rewrites narratives not only for your deliverance, but for his glory. Every reversal becomes a testimony. Every canceled verdict becomes a declaration of his supremacy. Every overturned report becomes evidence of his hand upon your life. Midnight becomes the moment where God reveals himself to you, through you, and around you in ways that mark your destiny forever. When God steps into the midnight hour, he does not simply illuminate the darkness. He restructures it, rewrites it, and reassigns it to work for your good. The midnight hour is not the moment when your story ends. It is the moment when heaven prepares a shift that defies human logic. When you stand in the tension between what was and what will be, God begins to orchestrate breakthroughs that no hand, no voice, no connection, no institution, and no earthly power can hinder. The midnight hour is the hour when God steps into the unseen realm, when he begins to move behind the curtain of your life, rearranging circumstances, repositioning people, and realigning events so that your destiny can emerge unchallenged. It is in the midnight hour that God begins to introduce possibilities you never imagined, open doors you didn't know existed, and release answers that exceed expectations. When God moves in the midnight hour, he is not restricted by time, hindered by opposition, or intimidated by obstacles. The midnight hour is his canvas, and your life becomes the place where his power is revealed in dimensions you have never encountered before. each and every time, and knowing that family is always at you. In the midnight hour, God deals with what has been delaying you. He confronts what has been resisting you. He dismantles the systems that have attempted to confine you. He speaks to the roots of generational patterns. He interrupts cycles of defeat and ushers in cycles of victory. The midnight hour is when God begins to shift your internal atmosphere so profoundly that external conditions must bow to the change He has initiated on the inside of you. He whispers strategies that become solutions. He breathes strength into weary places. He ignites hope where hope was fading. He fans the flames of your faith until your spirit begins to rise above the weight of every burden. The midnight hour is not a time of abandonment. It is a time of alignment. It is a divine appointment where God begins to recalibrate every detail of your life to match His purpose and His promise. It is the hour when God proves that your story is still unfolding, that your destiny is still active, and that your breakthrough is still in motion. This is the hour where heaven begins to issue decrees in your favor. Angels are dispatched. Chains begin to loosen, barriers begin to fall. What seemed impossible becomes attainable. What was locked becomes accessible. What was stagnant becomes accelerated. God begins to perform operations in the invisible that will soon manifest in the visible. This is the hour when He takes what has been withheld and releases it into your hands. The midnight hour is not the end of your strength. It is the beginning of God's supernatural intervention. It is the moment when God says, "Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." The midnight hour is when God demonstrates that He is not limited by the heaviness of your situation. He moves through darkness with precision. He navigates impossibility with ease. He commands storms with authority. He reveals Himself as the God who can do what no one else can do. It is in the midnight hour that divine reversals take place. God begins to reverse setbacks, reverse denials, reverse betrayals, reverse losses, reverse delays, reverse injustices. He takes the very things that were working against you and turns them into instruments of elevation. He takes attacks and converts them into testimonies. He takes what the enemy meant for evil and converts it into momentum. The midnight hour is when God creates divine turnarounds that leave you and everyone around you in awe. It is the hour where He brings you into opportunities that bypass protocols, into miracles that break natural laws, into blessings that override limitations. You don't need to qualify in the eyes of men when God qualifies you in the realm of the Spirit. In the midnight hour, God bypasses human systems to release supernatural outcomes. The midnight hour is also the hour of divine separation. God separates you from what can no longer accompany you. He separates you from environments that restrict your growth. He separates you from relationships that drain your strength. He separates you from patterns that sabotage your progress. He separates you from the voices that do not speak into your destiny. This separation is not rejection. It is preparation. It is the hand of God repositioning you for visibility, influence, impact, and fulfillment. It is God lifting you out of the ordinary and placing you into the extraordinary. The midnight hour removes what has been limiting you so God can release what He has ordained for you. As God moves in the midnight hour, He also downloads instructions that shape your next season. Ideas begin to flow, solutions become clear, problems lose their power, strategies begin to take form. God begins to direct your path with such clarity that confusion has no room to operate. He begins to speak order into chaos, direction into uncertainty, peace into turmoil. Your spirit becomes awakened. Your discernment becomes sharpened. Your focus becomes renewed. In the midnight hour, God upgrades your capacity to receive, perceive, discern, and advance. What you could not grasp before becomes accessible. What you could not handle before becomes manageable. What you feared before becomes conquered. This is the hour when God connects you to the right people. He positions destiny helpers, divine advocates, and strategic alliances that come not by coincidence, but by orchestration. He moves people into your life who carry what you need, who speak what you could not articulate, who build what you envisioned, who hold keys you are missing. Every connection God assigns in the midnight hour is purpose-driven, time-sensitive, and destiny-linked. These are not casual relationships. They are divine appointments shaped